Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, a beautiful queen sat by her window during the winter, sewing. As she gazed at snow-covered ground, she pricked her finger with the needle, and a few drops of her blood fell on the snow. The red on the white snow was so striking that she wished she could have a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. Not long after, the queen gave birth to a baby girl who had skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. She named her daughter Snow White. But sadly, the queen passed away soon after. The king, grieving the loss of his queen, remarried a woman who was beautiful but vain and wicked. The new queen possessed a magic mirror, which she would consult daily. She would ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would always reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." For years, the mirror told the queen she was the fairest, and the queen was content. However, as Snow White grew older, her beauty blossomed, and one day, when the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" the mirror responded, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White is fairer than you." Furious and consumed with jealousy, the queen decided that Snow White must be eliminated. She summoned a huntsman and ordered him to take Snow White deep into the forest and kill her. To prove that he had done the deed, she demanded that he bring back Snow White's heart. The huntsman reluctantly obeyed and led Snow White into the forest. However, when it came time to carry out the dreadful act, the huntsman was overcome with pity. He couldn't bring himself to harm Snow White, so he told her to run away and never return to the castle. Instead of Snow White's heart, he brought the queen the heart of a wild boar. Terrified and alone, Snow White ran deeper into the dark forest, stumbling over roots and through down trees. Eventually, she came upon a small cottage nestled in a clearing. She knocked on the door, but no one answered. Exhausted, she stepped inside. The cottage was strange. It had 7 tiny chairs, 7 small beds, and everything seemed perfectly sized for someone much smaller than herself. Snow White, overwhelmed with exhaustion, lay down across several of the little beds and fell fast asleep. That evening, the 7 dwarfs who lived in the cottage returned from working in the mines. Their names were Duck, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Doppy. They were surprised to find someone in their home. At first, they were cautious, but when they saw how beautiful and peaceful Snow White looked, they let her sleep. In the morning, Snow White woke and explained her story to the dwarfs. The kind-hearted dwarfs offered her refuge in their cottage, where she could live in safety, far from her wicked stepmother. Snow White gratefully accepted and began to live with the dwarfs, helping them around the house while they worked in the mines. Back at the castle, the queen once again consulted her magic mirror. She expected to hear that she was the fairest in the land, now that Snow White was supposedly dead. But to her shock, the mirror said, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs is fairer than you." Enraged that Snow White was still alive, the queen vowed to kill her herself. Using her knowledge of dark magic, the queen disguised herself as an old peddler woman. She traveled to the dwarf's cottage and offered Snow White a laced bodice as a gift. The bodice was enchanted, and when Snow White put it on, the queen tightened it so much that Snow White collapsed, unable to breathe. Thinking Snow White was dead, the queen returned to the castle. However, the dwarfs arrived just in time to loosen the bodice and revive Snow White. They warned her to be wary of strangers, but the queen was not finished. Determined to succeed, the queen disguised herself again, this time as a poor old woman selling apples. She made her way to the cottage and offered Snow White a beautifully shiny poisoned apple. The apple was so tempting that despite the dwarf's warnings, Snow White took a bite. As soon as she bit into the apple, Snow White fell to the ground, lifeless. When the dwarfs returned home and found her, they were heartbroken. Believing she was dead, they placed her in a glass coffin, refusing to bury her because she was still so beautiful, even in death. Many days passed, and one day, a prince who had heard stories of Snow White's beauty and kindness came upon the coffin. He was enchanted by her, and filled with sorrow, kissed her gently on the lips. Miraculously, the kiss broke the spell, and Snow White woke up. The dwarfs and the prince rejoiced, and Snow White was overjoyed to be alive once again. The prince asked Snow White to marry him, and she happily agreed. They returned to his kingdom, where they were married in a grand celebration. The wicked queen, upon learning that Snow White was still alive, and now a queen herself, was consumed with rage and jealousy, and she fled the kingdom, never to be seen again. Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, ruling their kingdom with kindness and grace. The 7 dwarfs visited often, and the magic of their friendship remained strong for all time.